So I think it's time to get this man on the show. So excited. He did appear at a Monopoly event convention last year, and I couldn't go, and I was so gutted. But I'm sure we're going to have a quick word about that. But let's welcome the wonderful Neil Marshall. Hello, Neil. Can you hear us all right?
How are you doing?
Yes, good, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on to the show live. Loving the T-shirt. If only we could get that T-shirt. Is that T-shirt available to buy online?
Totally, on Etsy.
Excellent. There we go. We'll get the link. We'll post it on the page. But thank you so much for joining myself and Dan to talk about your awesome career and your awesome films that have paved the way for films being made now and that have stood the test of time. They really have. So the first thing I wanted to ask was, obviously you're a writer, director and producer, Neil, but when you decided to become a writer and director, did you have a plan in place of what you wanted to achieve in your career?
Well, I mean, nothing beyond the idea of just being able to make movies. I mean, that seemed like quite a stretch from where I was starting anyway. So like that seemed like a perfectly good end goal, was the opportunity to try and make a living making movies was the end goal. Beyond that, it's just to keep on making movies.
Mm. And Dan, you had a question about the Northeast.
Neil, thank you. Welcome to the show, sir. Appreciate you coming on. Now, being myself from I just mentioned it earlier on about buying snacks in a movie. Actually, being from working class backgrounds and things like that, but coming from the Northeast, especially during the 70s and 80s, and you yeah. as a young man, as a teenager or late teens or early 20s, have gone, Dad, or Mom, I want to make movies as a career. Did you get much pushback? Because when I said I was going to work in entertainment at the turn of the millennium, my parents were like, "What, really? You don't want to get a trade?" You know what I mean, and that type of thing. Did you ever get that type of pushback?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, for years, I think I was, still getting from my dad, like, when are you going to get a real job? Sort of, like
I still get that now.
An engineer or something like that, something practical, that's something that he could grasp. But he in himself, he's an artist, like, so he understands the art. That's not a thing. I come from a family of artists. It wasn't so much that. It's just that he didn't necessarily think it was the best way to make a good living. So in the arts. And from where we were in the northeast of England, the film business seemed like a long way away. Hollywood seemed far away, let alone London. It was like London seemed far enough away. So, and also during the maybe not the 70s, but certainly the 80s, like the British film industry was not, with the odd exception, the British film industry was not particularly healthy then. So, it seemed even more of a stretch, but yeah, it's an unusual turn for anybody in my family to end up in this business, for sure.
I mean, I can't imagine it was quite an easy journey to where you are now. I mean, what was the biggest challenges you had to face to get to where you are now in the way of your career?
I think it's the same challenges that anybody faces who's trying to do this. Is the trying to be taken seriously, trying to get that break, trying to get that lucky bit of timing or whatever that just gets your first foot in the door or gives you your first opportunity to get out there and prove yourself. I mean, I didn't sort of ask for permission to become a filmmaker. I just started doing it, and it was kind of it was myself and my best mate at the time, who's now a professional screenwriter. We got hold of a film camera and we just started making films. And we didn't have a clue what we were doing really to start off with. We were just seeing what other people were doing and trying to copy from that or reading about it. And we didn't have the internet to fall back on, so there was no YouTube that you can go and get a video that'll tell you everything. There was nothing like that. There was no laptops or PCs or iPhones. It was, we read about it in magazines, we read about it in books, we understood the basic concepts. And we got some film and we started filming, and then we started editing, and then we started putting music to the edits, and then we started, just learning the process from the ground up and making a lot of mistakes and making a lot of stupid films along the way. But that's the whole point, you know. It's like, you know, we went out there trying to Indiana Jones or Aliens or something like that in our backyards, or in, you know, because we lived close to some woods, so we'd be quite often like seen down the woods, like running around with the film camera, trying to, you know, shooting guns and things like that, just trying to like make these stupid movies. But
I mean,
you know, I treasure that moment. I treasure that time.
I mean, many directors often say that when they were kids, there was one movie that literally cemented their passion for their direction. So, what movie for you was the one that really, you know, made you think, do you know what? I want to do this as a profession.
It was that one behind me. Raiders of the Lost Ark is the one that. Well, so I saw Star Wars when I was 7 at the cinema, and that made me fall in love with going to the cinema, the experience. And so around that time, I also saw like The Spy Who Loved Me and A Bridge Too Far, and there was a whole bunch of films in the late 70s that came out that really made me fall in love with the idea of going to the cinema. And so in '81, when I was 11, I got to go and see Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first time, and it just blew me away. It was just like everything I wanted a movie to be. Mm-hmm. That was combined with seeing the making of Raiders, a documentary on TV, and putting the two together, and seeing, okay, this is how they did that, you know, and that's how they did this, and understanding the concept. And then I was seeing Spielberg on set and just thinking, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, that's what I have to do. You know, mm-hmm. I want to do that. That looks like the best job ever. That's what I want to do. So that's where it started.
I mean, I've got to say, the making ofs are so good. I really, really, because I'm fascinated by everything in front of the camera as well as behind. Anyone that watches this channel will know that, you know, I've got affinity to directors, stunt work, special effects. And talking about special effects, let's talk about Dog Soldiers, because this film, I can't believe it's 20 years last year. I mean, how fast has that gone for you, Neil?
Like a blink. I mean, it really has. It's scary that it's 20 years. Makes me feel so old.
That's what we was just saying. It's like, I can remember when that came out. So obviously you wrote it, and it took you a bit of time to obviously get to the final script. But why soldiers and why werewolves? I mean, what inspired that story to come about?
The soldiers part definitely came from my family history. My granddad was in the army. He fought in the Battle of the Somme. My dad was in the army. He served in the occupation of Austria just after World War II. He was just too young to have served in World War II, and then he was kind of too old. Ultimately, he was too old to end up serving in Korea, but he was right between the two, and was on active service in Austria during the occupation. So like the third man type stuff, you know, is kind of that kind of period. And so I heard a lot of stories. A lot of stories about his, you know, and many of them were funny. That's the thing about it. He told me stories about how they used to go down and to the Russian sector, and they used to throw snowballs at the Russian sentries, and these Russian sentries used to shoot back at them, and that was their kind of like a fun night out. So things like that.
A lot's changed, hasn't it? Like, it used to be knock a door run, but before that it was throw snowballs at armed Russian soldiers.
Yeah. Yep. To do. But I really latched onto that kind of gallows sense of humor that the soldiers had. Mm-hmm. So I knew I wanted to do something about soldiers, and the combination of, obviously, like, inspired by things like Aliens, you know, bringing together war and horror into the same genre, was like, okay, what can we do along those kind of lines? And so I wanted to do about a bunch of British squaddies, but then the werewolves thing came from my deep love of horror, of all things horror, but particularly werewolves, in that I felt that they were underrepresented in the movie world, and rightfully so, because they're the most difficult one to pull off. But you know, when it comes to the classic monsters, the werewolf just somehow, that's the one that connected and scared the shit out of me more than vampires or whatever else. And so and the fact that there hadn't been so many werewolves movies around made it, more of a challenge. But I was massively inspired by, seeing American Werewolf, seeing The Howling, those kind of movies. So trying to do something of that ilk, combining that with like Zulu or Bridge Too Far or stuff like that, and then inspired by things like Assault on Precinct 13, was like all the little ingredients that came together to form Dog Soldiers.
I mean,
now,
Brian's
sorry, Brian. Brian's going to speak about one of his favourite scenes in just a second, but I wanted to try and flesh this out a little bit to get one of mine in. And there is there's some really British dark humour in there. In Dog Soldiers, and one of my favourite scenes is the one where the guy's just about to get attacked, and he kind of squares up to one of the werewolves and tries to box fight it, and I found it hilarious, I found it terrifying, and I found it wonderful because the way you flesh these characters out in the same way you do in The Descent as well. Everybody has their own personality, and it really comes across really well. I genuinely adore the way that you've managed to give that. Gallows humor is the best way of explaining it to those soldiers. I mean, to get the banter for the soldiers, because it's very specific, isn't it? It must have been really important to you, right?
It was. I did a lot of research, a lot of reading to make sure that I got that right. I felt I owed it to the soldiers to get it right. I'd seen a lot of films, including something like 28 Days Later, where like the British squaddies are depicted as a bunch of psychos, days of whatever they've gone through, but like they've completely lost their minds, murdering rapists, a lot of them. I'm like, that's, if people lost their minds that quickly, we'd be in big trouble. But I just thought that I wanted to depict the squaddies in a more truthful light and bring that sense of humor out and that professionalism. And their camaraderie and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to do justice to that because I thought it's the kind of movie that they should be watching,
I mean,
and it turned out in droves. But so that was a big deal for me, for sure. And as you say, that that moment with Darren squaring off against the werewolf, that was a combination of elements. There was always going to be a fight between that character and the werewolf, but Darren could box. Darren is a boxer. And he brought the boxing element to it, which I just thought was, soon as I kind of said I could box with a werewolf and spar with it a bit, I was just like, that's genius. I love it. And it worked so well. It was just like, yeah, let's do that.
I mean, off the back of that, I mean, did you have to put all the actors through some form of training in the way of the army? Because I could say this now because I don't work for them, but for about 6 years, I used to DJ for the SAS at Hereford. And seeing all the guys around having drinks.
I'm trying to picture an SAS.
trying to what? Picture to what?
Trying to picture like an SAS disco in my head, like if you DJing for the SAS, and they're all there with their balaclavas on, giving it some. I love.
Believe me, the requests that they made, you wouldn't imagine an SAS soldier making requests. It was very glam, very 70s. That's all I'm saying. But I mean, looking at them in the room, having drinks, letting loose, I can see that in the soldiers, in Dog Soldiers. So, I mean, did you have to put them through training to get them well oiled together?
I wish. I mean, we didn't have the budget of like a band of brothers to put them on a week-long boot camp or something like that. We had like one day in Luxembourg prior to shooting, of which we had an ex-French Foreign Legion guy who put them through their paces. And at some point during that day, Kevin McKidd took a dive and cracked his ribs, two of them. He didn't tell anybody. He was terrified that we would replace him in the movie. So he kept it quiet and suffered in silence for a week, and then eventually kind of came out with it. And he was like, "I'm so sorry. I just didn't want to not leave the movie." And it was just like that just added to his dedication to the part, and the whole camaraderie of the piece was like he was prepared to do that. And we got him as soon as we got him medical attention. He was fine, but the fact that he kind of just sucked it in and like I'm not gonna lose out on this job was awesome. But yeah, that was the extent of the training. I mean, so much was just actors acting and me giving guidance. And so like Sean had done some stuff with, military stuff before. So they brought something of, brought something of that to the part. But I kept a close eye on it at all times.
Or you could have just taken them out for a night in Newcastle. That would have got them well trained.
Well, Northeast anyway, so they had been on that training course.
I mean, one of my favourite scenes has got to be with Sean on the bed, getting knocked out, and then it not working and getting knocked out again. I just think that scene is just pure gold. I mean, I heard rumours that he had a few drinks before filming that. I mean, from a director's point of view, because obviously he's supposed to come across quite drunk, how easy was that to deal with an actor having a few stiff drinks before shooting?
Well, first and foremost, he asked me first. He asked for my permission just to have a couple, just to loosen himself up a bit. And I figured he knew what he was doing. He wasn't going to get out of control. It was just enough just to take the edge off. And it worked a dream. But he was still so complementous enough to be, he knew his lines and all that kind of stuff. And when it came to that punch, it was like he was aware that Kev had kind of missed the mark a little bit, and he was the one who like improvised coming back and just like going, "No, hit me properly," and then so Kev like overcompensated the next time round and clipped his nose, and so Sean went down and there was like blood splashed across the wall, and we were like, "There's no special effects on this shot." So, and yeah, it was Sean's blood all over the wall. So Kev was just, and of course, as soon as I called a cut, like Kev was like, "Oh my god, oh my god!" I'm sorry. All the toughness I anticipated. It was just like, "Oh my god, I hate you."
No, I love awesome. That. I love that Geordie knows the appeal of how to make drink work. You know what I mean? Like pandering a few stereotypes there, Neil, that I'm not unhappy about. You know what I mean?
I have my own experience with that kind of stuff, but I knew Sean knew how to handle his drink as well. So it was like, if you're saying you're going to have just enough to be tipsy, I trust you on that. He knows his stuff. So
yeah.
I mean, why do you feel this movie still stands? Sorry, what was that?
So we were all younger and up for it then. It's like anything goes.
I mean, why do you think this movie stands out still 20 years on? Because it's crazy. I mean, this has been turned into one of the most British cult horror classics. I mean, what do you think is the secret source of this movie that's attracted so many people to it?
I think it is the characters. I think that's what ultimately, if it was if they were like really boring and it was just a werewolf movie, I don't think it would have stood the test of time. I think it's people come back because they love those characters and they love the humor and they love that banter between them and some of the crazy authentic soldier dialogue and stuff like that. That's why I think it stood the test of time.
And I've got to mention as well, one of the actors in it that appears in quite a few of your films. I've got a question from Dan Hayes. Let me just put it just here. Would you say Craig Conway is somewhat of a muse to you? Because obviously he was the first one to get killed in Dog Soldiers. He's been in Doomsday. He's been in quite a few of your projects. But that question is from Dan Hayes.
Absolutely, Craig is a legend. And it's not for want of choice that I haven't managed to work with him again recently. Like it's mostly because I haven't worked in the UK for ages. But I've tried on occasions to get him back into some movies and things like that. But he's either been busy or whatever is unavailable. But yeah, absolutely, Craig's a total legend. I mean, he proved that on Dog Soldiers, that there was originally a different actor cast in that role, and they literally they dropped out like 24 hours before filming, and we were like, fuck, and I thought like he'd been in this short film that I'd done called Combat. I said, oh God, give Craig a ring, and literally he just like he got a phone call, said yes, and it was a tiny little part, and hopped on a plane, and was there within like, because we were in Luxembourg, so and he was there within like 4 hours or something like that, and got him in a costume, and next day he filmed it. I mean, total legend. And then the shit that we put him through on the descent, and I felt I owed him something after that. So giving him the role of Saul in Doomsday was like a big thank you for everything he'd done to that point. Yeah.
I mean, we talk about sequels, and you must be sick of people asking you this. We've got a question from Kieran. Will we ever see a sequel to Dog Soldiers? I mean, I mean, it's been enough time now. It's been 20 years. Do you think that we'll ever see a sequel to it?
I'm trying. That's all I can say is I'm trying. It's not as simple as me going out and just making a sequel, because I don't own the rights. The Dog Soldiers made 20 years ago was that somebody else financed it, and then they own the rights. And so trying to work that out has been quite a drawn out affair. But I'm not there yet, but I'm pushing hard. The point being is that I do get asked that. I get asked that every time I do an interview. I wish I'd had $1 for every time I got asked. But and it's I'm glad that people are asking, because it shows there's an interest out there. It shows there's a desire out there to see a sequel. So I want to keep the fans happy. They've been loyal to me for 20 years. I want to reward them. And it was easy as clicking my fingers, it would have been done already, but it's not. But we are trying. All I can say. And everybody will know when it, if I get the green light, or whatever, if I can do it. Believe me, people will know. I'll let them know.
I mean, have you got an idea in place of what you want to do for the sequel? Has that already been written?
I've written a story outline. I haven't written the script yet. I didn't want to invest, because it's sort of, on a bit of a tightrope. Is like I wanted to know that it was definitely happening before I committed to writing it like that, because I didn't want to write it and then it doesn't happen. It would just be heartbreaking. So I just thought, I've got the story. I know where it's going to go. It is picking up 20 years later. So I'm not trying to kid anybody that it's like the next day. It's like it's 20 years after. And we'll see where we go from there.
Awesome. And it's such a great film, and it's available now on 4K for us to all enjoy. So please go out, all the viewers and listeners, and buy it on 4K. It's fantastic. It really is. And I just wanted to touch on The Descent, which I've got to say, 2005, probably one of the most tense films I've ever seen in my whole life. I'm never going cave-in. I'm never going into dark spaces. This film is just fantastic. But how annoying is it for a director to bring out a movie and then a similar movie gets brought out very close by when you bring out yours?
It happens more often than you think. And it's like, it's astonishing how often these kind of parallel movies occur. And it's nothing more than chance. But we knew the other film was out there. We got wind of it quite early on. I think we were in pre-production when we heard that the other film was being made as well, and we knew that they had a much bigger budget than we did. That it was a studio-backed movie. It was going to be a much bigger thing. So we were aware that we were kind of the underdogs from the start. But what we did then was we went hell for leather to get The Descent made and into the cinemas. So like we shot it in January, February, but it was in cinemas in the UK in July. Which is alarmingly fast for a movie, and that we didn't rush it. We didn't, we just kept on going until it was done, and then it was ready to go in the cinema. And the idea of that was to beat the other film into the cinema in the UK, which we did by a couple of months, because that was coming out in August. And then what happened with the US release? They said, well, we're actually going to hold back, let that film come out, and then we'll release The Descent early the following year, which again they did, and they played in Sundance and stuff like that year. So the other film kind of fell between the UK release or the international release, and then the US release of Descent. And as it turned out, we made the better movie. What can I tell you?
How very modest.
I mean, you're right. I mean, we mentioned it earlier on before you came on. There's a film called White House Down and then Olympus Has Fallen, which are two very similar films. But there is obviously a clear winner in that matchup. And it's the same for you. The Descent just is miles better. It really, really is. It's so raw, so scary, and I heard in an interview that you said that you kept the crawlers separate from the cast to create that, authenticity of that shot of when they see them for the first time. Was that the same for Dog Soldiers? Did you use that sort of same way of keeping them separate, the wolves from the cast?
To keep the wolves from the door.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't think it even occurred to me on Dog Soldiers. And the way that we did the werewolves, things like that. I mean, everyone was aware of what they were going to look like, kind of from pre-production onwards. But somehow it just became a little bit more controlled on the Descent because we did all the location stuff first, and that didn't involve any crawlers. So it was just the studio stuff, and then we actually shot that studio stuff in story order. Like, we were very lucky; we shot it in linear story order, and so we knew at that point it was like, well, literally the first time the crawlers are going to be on set is the first time the characters meet them, and so it was like, right, so let's keep them from the actors, and let's not only keep the creatures themselves, but let's keep the actors who are playing the creatures separate. Let's keep the designs and the makeup effects separate. That the actors aren't allowed to see any of it, and pull that off, and it worked to good effect. It really helped build up some tension amongst the cast. It created a great reveal moment, and it just paid off.
I mean, how difficult was it to shoot that movie? Because there is a lot of small spaces, light being, one of the main factors as well, because, you're in the caves. And there's a good question here from Dan again, saying how much of the Descent was filmed on location compared to on set?
Well, the secret is that there isn't a single real cave in the whole movie.
Wow.
We all, myself and the cast went caving in pre-production just to get a feel for it, and it was very clear from that had we attempted to film in real caves, somebody would have died. I mean, it's just so dangerous in these spaces, and so impractical as well. Our script had specific caves and designs of caves to fit certain moments in the film. So, like, we would have had to go scour every cave imaginable to try and find one that fit the bill. And then, is that even practical to look? We couldn't travel around everywhere, and would it have been practical to film in? And it's just like, it would have just been impossible. So we knew from the start we were going to be building the caves. The location stuff was just exterior forests, the cabin in the woods, that kind of stuff, the car crash at the beginning, but everything else in the case was in the studio. That said, that didn't somehow make it easier. We designed the cave sets to be like regular caves. If they're small, they're small. If the camera had to fit in them with the actors. We didn't cut holes in walls or break the fourth wall, as it were. We made it awkward. We made it extremely cold and wet because it was January in Pinewood, and there was no heating in the studio, so it was absolutely freezing. The water that was being pumped in was from outside, so that was freezing cold. We constantly had these guys with hose pipes and spritzers over the set, so there's this constant mist coming down through all the sets and it running down the walls, and it just made the sets look more realistic, but it just meant everybody was soaked all day, and the actors were freezing. I mean, between takes we had to wrap those kind of thermal blankets around everybody to stop them from shaking and getting hypothermia and things like that. So it wasn't easy at all, but they were all troopers, and they did an amazing job.
I mean, what I love about your films is that it's the practical side of things, and I wanted to find out your view on CGI, because so many films now heavily rely on CGI, and I know that there are certain circumstances where it might be needed, but I love how the fact that you like the wolves and the crawlers. It's real. So what's your view on using CGI? Is there too much or too little? I mean, what's your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's overused. Definitely, I think that people just kind of fall back on it because it's easier. You know, it's like easier just to throw it at post production and say just do it in CG as opposed to trying to work out stuff on set and do it practically. But when you think about any, you know, if you ask now, like list the best monster movies of all time or the creature effects of all time, the chances are they're going to go back to things like Alien and Predator and The Thing, and which are all practical, and I still look as real today as they did then. They haven't aged at all, and yet stuff that's done last year in CG can look outdated pretty quickly, but inherently, with a few exceptions, it's still something you look at and you know it's not real. You know it's not actually a real thing. Even if it is a suit, it's something that's tangible, it's touchable, it's there in the room with the cast. And the lights bouncing off it and the rain's bouncing off it and, you know, the actors are interacting with it. All these kind of effects that happen and happy accidents that happen with something that's real that you can't plan for. And CG is usually flawless because it's designed one frame at a time. Everything is 100% controlled. The lighting's controlled. Everything is controlled. So you don't get that reality element, those happy accidents. I think those things really stand out and what make things, you know, feel real and believable. And I think there's a happy medium somewhere. I think like Guillermo del Toro in his movies, he combines practical with CG. Like he'll use CG to enhance his practical effects, like CG will do eyes or blinking and tongues and things like that on a practical creature, and that blending of the two looks amazing. It looks brilliant. It looks hyper realistic, and it doesn't detract from the reality of the thing because it is a practical effect. It's just been given that extra little bit of life that that helps. I love that concept, but it's still it's down to a director or producers and such like embracing the idea. Okay, well, we're going to work hard because it's a craft. It's an incredible craftsmanship stuff off. It takes time to get right, but when it's right, and you've seen American Werewolf in London, the transformation sequence. It's like when it's right, it's incredible and will stand the test of time. Do that.
And the people are obviously working on these, making these costumes, doing this makeup. They are artists, and this CGI. Don't get me wrong, the people doing that are artists as well. But I would have thought that people would prefer to use practical because, like the original Star Wars trilogy, just to me feels more real, more authentic compared to the later one. But I've just got a few fan questions. So number one Marvel fan, which is Thomas Derrick, wants to know, do you own any key props from Dog Soldiers?
Did you rob anything, Neil?
I always try and rob something from a shoot. So, I know I have one of the werewolf heads. So, yeah, hang on, we'll get it.
Oh, my God. I'm actually really excited about this. If he pulls out a werewolf head now.
And he puts it on.
Oh my gosh,
that is amazing.
This is we call him Vincent in the film because he's the one who gets his ear cut off. I'm amazed he's in such good condition after 20 years, but I wouldn't put him on because he's like 20-year-old stuntman sweat. So I'm not gonna put him on.
That's made my day, and everybody in the comments now is going to be deciding that can we get Prop Store involved? Can we do some brokering there?
Yeah, exactly. The sponsors of the show will be twitching right now, Neil. Wanting to be in contact with you. But I've got a question from Chris Margettis. Chris is an actor and a filmmaker. He made a movie called The Manson Brothers Midnight Zombie Massacre, which has got Max Martini. He directed it, and it's just an awesome film. It really, really is. He's curious if Rhonda was an offer for Doomsday or did she have to audition? And if so, who else was up for the role?
Well, it's Rona, not Rhonda, so like,
Rhonda.
oh,
So,
she might. um, it was down to it was two choices. It was Rona and another actress, and I met them both, and Rona stood out a mile as being the right one for the job. It wasn't an audition as such. It was just a meeting to get to know them, and I'd seen her work, but it was more the mindset thing than anything of like who was right for the part, in my mind. And I think she is Eden Sinclair. I mean, I think there's no doubt about it.
and what an awesome film. I mean, you've worked with so many great stars on set. I mean, has there been an actor, that's really blew your socks off that you've given the part to and you've thought, do you know what? I'm so glad they're perfect.
I wouldn't say there's just been one. I mean, there's been many. I mean, it's like luckily, I got very lucky with the cast of Dog Soldiers and Descent, and like I think they all perfectly fit the parts. Sean and Kev and all that lot. I mean, just incredible, and Liam, and just they all fit the parts amazingly. I was lucky enough on Doomsday. I got to work with Bob Hoskins and Malcolm McDowell. Two legends. Both absolutely fabulous, just lovely, lovely people. Such a sad loss with Bob. I worked with Hopkins, who was fantastic. That was on Westworld. That was later on. But I mean, I can't think of anybody that in the films that I've done that doesn't fit the part. I think I take great pains to get the right person in the role, not necessarily the most famous person in the role, but the right person. I think that's important.
I mean, I've got to
The-
say, oh, sorry, go on.
I tell you what, I just on the back of that point you were talking about, Neil. You've directed episodes of Game of Thrones, for example, with people like Stephen Delane and the Battle of Blackwater, and I mean those are some big episodes that you've done on that show. Do you find it difficult to go into somewhere where you haven't picked the cast, you haven't, you're not part of that, you're picking up someone else's work essentially? Is that how it feels, or do you get a lot of creative control with that type of thing?
It's a different mindset. I mean, I think maybe the first time because Game of Thrones was Blackwater was my first ever TV job. So that was the first time I really encountered that. But it's just like, with that kind of thing, that you're going there to do a job for somebody else. You're a director for hire. You park your ego at the door. You're there to fulfill somebody else's story, and it's somebody else's vision. But you're going there to do the best job possible. In the case of Game of Thrones, it was wonderful because they wanted you to bring your ideas to the table, your thoughts to the table as a creator as well. And so with Blackwater specifically, I brought a lot of my knowledge of military history and strategy to the table that wasn't necessarily in the script. But so I was able to kind of bring that to the table and say, well, I think the battle, as written, didn't make any sense. So we need to refine what the battle is and how it's going to work so that the audience can understand what's going on. And bringing in things like a battering ram and stuff like that, which, I designed a boat that could have a battering ram, and it turned upside down and became like a shell to protect the battering ram that went up to the gate and started hammering at the gate. That was not in the script, so it was like, okay, this is bringing ladders with them was like not in the script. So just stuff like that, and they were so receptive to that. And with the working with the actors, it was like there wasn't any interference. It was like my interpretation of the script as to what should be happening in this particular scene. I remember talking to Lena Headey about when she's down in the basement with all the wives and all that kind of stuff going out of her mind because it's the last place she wants to be, and she's getting quite drunk and a bit leery. And I said to her, I said, you're like the drunk aunt at a wedding, like just let out a fuck. And she was like, yeah, I'm gonna run with that, and played around with those ideas. So it was a different kind of mindset, but it wasn't anything to do with like the fact that I hadn't cast them in the roles. They already been superbly cast before I got there. So that was easy. That made my job easy.
I mean, I've got to say, it's extraordinary, your TV work, because literally you've gone through so many genres. So not only Game of Thrones, Westworld, you was executive producer on Lost in Space and directed a couple of episodes, which I thought was an amazing series as well. Have you got a genre of TV that you enjoy the most getting your teeth into?
What I found the best thing about working in TV is the ability to jump from genre to genre. And instead of like doing like one feature every couple of years where you like that's your world for, a couple of years, within the TV space, I would do maybe 3 or even 4 shows a year and jump from sci-fi to horror to fantasy to something else. And pirates, holy shit, I got to do pirates. I got to do Black Sails with pirates. I got to do a western on Westworld, plus some sci-fi in Westworld, then some sci-fi in Lost in Space, and then a bit of Constantine, a bit of Hannibal. So I was jumping all over the place, I kind of really like that, not being tied down to one genre all the time. But it was great to do some sci-fi for sure.
So you mentioned earlier on that you like to take a piece from every project that you've worked on. So I'm just thinking now, have you got a piece from all those shows?
Any of my films, I'm trying to think, have I got anything from I don't think I managed to nick any, because with TV shows it's a bit difficult, because if you like nick a prop, it's like they're going to need it. So I don't think I've got anything from the TV shows as such. I don't think anybody. I'm trying to think actually. Game of Thrones or anything like that. No, I didn't get anything from the shows because they needed them all. So I couldn't.
But I wanted to ask as well your current views on the writers and actors strike that is happening in the States, and obviously you being a UK filmmaker and obviously making films in the UK. What's your view on the current strikes, and do you think it will, I suppose, help the UK film industry?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword at the moment, because it's like what they're fighting for over there will affect the way things go forward in the UK film industry as well. Even though our equity or whatever hopefully will follow suit and get the same deals that SAG's going after, and make sure that equity actors are as protected as SAG actors are. In a way, SAG and the WGA are kind of, what they're doing is setting a template for everybody else and the way it should. I hope, and I hope it's not the case that anybody who's not part of their guild is basically going to get treated like shit, and then you have to fight to get into their guilds just to get some respect. I don't know. We've got to wait and see what happens there. But the double-edged sword part of it is, as I totally support what they're trying to do, and it's like it has to be done. And it's a necessary evil at this point. But at the same time, I'm worried about all the crew that are out of work because of it. I hear both sides of the story. I hear friends of mine who are unemployed for the rest of the year, whatever it is, because jobs are cancelled, and then they start to get into trouble. So I just want them to sort it out as soon as possible.
I mean, there's definitely going to be a knock-on effect. The thing is, that knock-on effect is like a domino, and cinemas. We don't go to the cinema enough as it is. So, come next year when movies aren't being released and everything like that, I had an idea though. I think we should reach out to the cinemas and do a Neil Marshall season. Get all your movies in the cinema and do like a marathon. That'd be awesome.
But even if it wasn't my stuff, I mean, I think there's room to do like a retro screenings of great movies. There's a lot of stuff I'd like to see in the cinema that I've never seen in the cinema, worth seeing. But the movies that I've been making this year hopefully will be coming out when there's a big hole in the marketplace. So,
I mean, I was lucky enough to watch The Layer before it actually came out. Which I thought was awesome. And obviously, this isn't just a job for you. It's clear it's a passion, because you keep delivering some, and all your stuff is just jaw dropping. You've got The Duchess coming out soon. Can you tell us a bit about that movie and what it's about and when it's potentially going to be released?
Well, again, it's a completely different sort of change of tack. Doing it's a crime thriller or a gangster movie, whatever you put it into one of those camps or both. It's about an East End, London girl, small time thief who falls in love with a guy who runs a diamond smuggling operation, and they get together, and then he ends up getting betrayed by one of his own side, and she's left for dead, and eventually she comes back and takes revenge on everyone, and becomes the new kind of kingpin, because the new cartel boss by the end of it takes over the operation. But there's a bit more to it than that, but it's kind of lots of violent revenge. It's fun.
And when is that planned to be released?
Not 100% sure at the moment, but just finalizing the distribution for the UK and the US at the moment. Then they haven't settled on any release dates yet, but I'm guessing hopefully later in the year.
And will there be a premiere? Will there be a big event for it?
I sincerely hope so. I think if nothing else, we'll lay something on like we did with The Lair in London, and just put together a screening for people to come to. I think it needs to be seen on the big screen. I mean, it may well get at the moment it's looking like it's going to get a theatrical release in the UK anyway. So fingers crossed, touch wood, then because it's everything I do is I design stuff for the big screen. All 235. It's all widescreen stuff. And big. I like cinematic stuff. So, yeah.
Well, myself and Dan would love to come along to the premiere. I'm just putting it in there because we haven't been to a proper premiere yet, have we, Dan? And
no, we're too ugly for it. We're not pretty enough, we've been told. So you know what I mean. If we can, if you don't mind ugly people from various parts of the Midlands and the North coming up to your premiere of your big snazzy movie, then we're down. We're down. We're coming.
We can stand next.
So you're right.
We can stand next to the beautiful people, Dan, and we'll just make them look amazing. It will be like, Beauty and the Beast.
Mutually beneficial.
You guys should definitely come along. Definitely.
Yes. Appreciate it.
Yes, and then obviously, I just wanted to add one more thing, which is thank you so much, Neil. You've been a great guest. It's such an honour because I've been a fan of your work, and if there's any requests that I can make, is if you could make another film like The Centurion, because I just think it's just an awesome film. It really, really is. It's one of my favourite of all time, and Olga in it is just amazing. Any plans on making any period films like that in the future?
I mean, not exactly like that, but I mean, I do have some other period stuff to do. I've got like an Arthurian movie I'm trying to do. So, yeah, I've got all sorts. I've got an Indiana Jones type movie. I've got a Arthurian medieval. It's a medieval heist movie. All sorts of stuff.
Looking forward.
Arthurian was fun. That was grueling as well for the actors. Put them through hell.
You know what? I can imagine, and it looked like it as well. But another great cast. It really, really is. But Neil, I'll let you get off. If you don't go anywhere right now, I'm going to end the live stream. Thank you, everyone, for commenting. Please hit subscribe, like, and share. I hate saying that. I feel like such a YouTuber, streamer. Hate it. I'm at that age where I don't want to be like trendy. But thank you so much for watching. Neil, don't go anywhere. Thank you. Good night.